Welcome back to Andersen Acres. We're in the kitchen this evening, and today we are going to make a sweet bread that often decorates tables around the holidays. I'm going to make a European Stollen bread. This is a braided bread that has almonds in it, and it can also have raisins or currants, sometimes cranberries, and you might decorate the top with those candied cherries you see in the supermarket around the holidays. You can make this at any time of year. In fact, this is January and I'm making it now just because I want to. And it has a nice little glaze on top, very sweet, a lot of fun to make, and it's quite delicious. Let's get started. The first thing we're going to want is about half a cup of butter. Yes, I did just use my fingers to put a clump of butter in there. Sometimes you just do that. That's half a cup of butter. You could use margarine. It will change the flavor of this bread. So if you do have a half of a cup of butter, you should use butter. We are also going to use one egg. One delicious egg. Just one. You just need a little bit of egg in here. We are going to add 1 teaspoon of salt. Any salt you have will do. Half a cup of sugar. It is quite a sweet bread, so yes, half a cup of sugar. 1 full cup of milk. I'm using 2% milk. You can use any kind of milk you like. I would not use skim, but you could use whole milk if you like. Or, well, almost any milk. I wouldn't use the skim milk. Now we're going to add 3 cups of all-purpose or bread flour, whichever you have. This doesn't really work with a whole wheat. So you don't want to use a whole wheat flour. You definitely want to use your all-purpose flour or your bread flour. Now we're going to put 3/4 of a cup of sliced almonds. You can buy these at the store already sliced, so you don't have to sit there and slice almonds yourself. These are blanched and sliced for me, so I don't have to do it because I'm not going to sit here and slice almonds. It's really annoying. So buy them that way. You don't have to do it yourself. 1 heaping teaspoon of, I'm using bread machine yeast. You could also use quick rise. If you're doing it by hand, you would use traditional yeast. This is all going to go in my bread maker. Again, it's just easier. It doesn't really save you any time. It'll still take the same amount of time to make this bread. It just means that while this bread is kneading, I can go and do something else. So we'll come back in about 1.5 hours after the bread has mixed, kneaded, and finished its first rise. All right, our dough is completely ready to shape. It is kind of marshmallow-like in texture. Remember, if your dough is too wet, you're going to want to add a little flour. If it's too dry, you're going to want to add a little water until you have this type of consistency. You want it to feel a little sticky, but not actually be sticky. So now we're going to divide it into 3. By the way, this is a good time if you're using any dried fruit, like if you want to use any raisins, for example. This is a good time to knead those raisins into the dough. You could do raisins, you could do cranberries, you could do pretty much anything you want. This is a good time to just take a minute to roll that into your dough. You flatten it out, add some of your things, roll it. You can even do each rope a different flavor. So if you wanted to do raisins in one, cranberries in another, and another one plain, you can absolutely do that. I'm not doing that because my kids don't really like raisins or dried cranberries or basically anything like that. So we're not doing it. So we have 3 pieces of dough. I'm going to roll up my sleeve so I don't catch the edge of my shirt. And we're just going to roll these out until you have a nice long rope. How long your rope's going to be really depends on how thick you want your loaf. Remember, 3 times because we're doing 3. So this, if I were to braid it together now, would actually be 3 times as thick. So I want it a little thinner than that. I'm going to go out to about 18 inches or so. Move these out of the way. 18-ish inches, 16 inches, somewhere in that vicinity. And I can figure out exactly how many inches that is because I can just kind of line that up. That's about right. So my other 2, I'm going to do about the same length. There we go. Remember, you can add anything you like, any kind of dried fruit. You can add more nuts. I'm only doing almond, but you could do plenty of other nuts. You could do walnuts or pecans, doesn't matter. Whatever you have, whatever you like. So I'm doing a fairly thick loaf, so you could stretch it out all the way to about 24 inches if you wanted. I'm not going that thin. I want a thicker loaf, but it's really up to you. It's your loaf. You can go however long you want. Okay, so we're going to line them up. And to make a really nice braid, we're actually going to start from the center. Okay, so when you start from the center, that's the center. So you just start crisscrossing. Just kind of pretend this part isn't there. So you just do a few crisscrosses. Pinch together, tuck it underneath. Now you're going to want to braid from this side. So you kind of take a look at where your braiding is. And now you have to braid upside down. Because this one you went over, here you have to go under. So this one I'm bringing under, then this one I'm bringing under. So when you're doing braiding from the middle, on one side you braid over, on the other side you braid under. Okay, so this side, because I'm going the other way, you have to braid opposite or it's not going to look very good. Okay, kind of gather that together, do a little pinch at the end, and kind of tuck it underneath. There we go. We have a nice, fairly tight loaf. There we go, because we don't want it too long. We don't want it, I don't want mine too long. If you want a longer loaf, just roll your ropes out longer. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to get my pan. I'm just using the same baking sheet I've used in countless videos. Put it here, kind of arrange it the way I want it. Make it look the way you want it to look. So that's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to stick this in my microwave and leave it alone for about an hour so it can rise. You can cover it with a damp tea towel or a piece of plastic wrap, anything that'll lock in the moisture, and put it somewhere that's fairly warm. So you don't want to stick this on your deck if it's cold outside. Usually in your kitchen is good enough. I use my microwave because it keeps moisture and the humidity and the heat in, sorry. So wherever you can that is warm and will keep the humidity in. So we'll come back in about an hour, take a look at it, and bake it up. So our European Stollen loaf has risen enough that it can now go in the oven. It took about an hour and 10 minutes, hour and 15 minutes, something like that. We are going to bake it at 375 degrees Fahrenheit for about 25 minutes until it is thoroughly cooked. Then we are going to cool it completely before we come back. So when we come back, this loaf will be baked and it will have cooled completely so that we can put the glaze on. So there's our European Stollen bread. It is all cooled. That's why it's taken me as long as it has all day. I've been doing this to make this particular loaf because we have to wait until it's 100% cool before we put the glaze on. It does look fantastic baked for about 30 minutes. 25 to 30 minutes is sufficient at 375. So let's make the glaze. To make the glaze, you're going to need 1 tablespoon of milk. Okay, to that, pour in a 1/4 cup of icing sugar, sometimes known as powdered sugar. Use a little whisk, or a big whisk, but I'm using a little whisk, and just get that all mixed in there. Get that nicely incorporated into a glaze. When you are mostly incorporated, you can add a little bit of cinnamon. You do not have to. Cinnamon is entirely optional. So I'm adding about 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. There we go, about 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon to make a nice little glaze. Okay, there we go. So we're going to let that mix up, and then we do want the sugar to dissolve in the milk. So we don't want to use this glaze immediately. We're going to set a timer and come back 5 minutes from now. We want that glaze to fully develop. We want to let that sugar dissolve a little bit, so we don't want it all gritty. So 5 minutes, we're going to come back. All right, our glaze has appropriately thickened. Come here, Whiskey, it's okay. Yeah, it's okay. Our glaze has appropriately thickened. That should be about how it looks. Now you can get this onto your bread in any way you like. Hi, buddy. What? It's not cooked yet. Dog wants the bread. So you can get this glaze onto your bread any way you'd like. You can either drizzle it directly from your whisk or from a spoon, or you can pour it on. It's entirely up to you. And what pattern you use is also entirely up to you. So we're just going to zigzag it a little bit. We're not going to worry about being messy, that's why the mat is down. And use all of your glaze. You're going to want your glaze to set for about 10 minutes before you cut the bread. But once you have let your glaze set, cut away and enjoy. I hope you enjoyed making European Stollen bread with us today. Hopefully you'll try this at home. It is easy to make and it's a crowd pleaser. We'll see you tomorrow.